Good morning. Holiday, the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Wednesday, June 16, 2021, and the time now is 9 o'clock. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Monday, June 7, followed by June 10. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 55-36, the Fiscal Year Appropriation Act as requested by the Governor relative to the Department of Agriculture Fiscal Year 2022 budget. The budget hearing general rules. Those testifying on behalf of the bill number 55-36 CR relative to the Department of Agriculture are invited to the panel, and they are, we start with Mrs. God, I'm going to murder your last name, Director, but I'll let you go ahead and identify your name completely. Ms. Brandt, what's your last name again?
Muña is the most important part.
Okay, the way it's written, it's not even that. But anyway, you'll be allowed a chance to introduce all your staff. So then, when we start the questioning, please, each one of you identify yourself, your position, and then from there on, you won't have to repeat it. Okay? After you're asked questions, if any. All right? Written testimony should be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony. For photocopying, testimonies may be read. Lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes, but you'll be allowed sufficient time to present everything you need to present. All right? Those testifying will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, please remain in the room for questions. And for additional testimony may be desired by the members once they get here. But we're going to continue on. We start at 9 and we'll just move along. All right?
Yes, sir.
Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance of this agenda, which is your budget, the Department of Agriculture. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the budget hearing, period. Okay? Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony or may be asked to leave or be escorted from the room. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and your title for the record. At this time, I ask the panel members of the Department of Agriculture to rise and for our Sergeant Arms to please swear them in.
Please rise and raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, you will affirm that any and all information that you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Yes. Mr. Chair, they're all under oath. You may proceed. You may be seated.
All right, thank you. I'd like to also recognize Senator Jose Pidu Terlay has joined us this morning. Mrs. Muña Brandt. Please introduce yourself clearly so everybody can hear it. Sure. And then we'll move from there. And I notice you have maybe 50 slides, but just go ahead and just present your slides. The people of Guam will be able to witness this and see it and hear it. And then if there's any questions, they can pose the questions to my committee. Ma'am, please begin.
Hafiday and good morning, Senator San Agustin, Senator Terlahi. My name is Chelsea Muña Brecht. I am the Director of the Guam Department of Agriculture. With me today, I have my Administrative Services Officer, Antonia Santos, our Forestry Division Chief, Christine Farron, our Agricultural Development Services Division Chief, John Borja, and in the waiting area is Lieutenant Richard Regadio, our Conservation Officer in charge. If we may start the slides, please. Next slide. This is the organizational chart for the Department of Agriculture, under which you will see we have 5 different sections, although our law enforcement section now officially reports to the Director's Office, so we consider them a pseudo 6th section. Next slide. Beginning with our Agriculture Development Services section, we have our Division Chief. We have 3 new positions filled under the Agriculture Development Services. These are professional level positions. So we have a total of 8 personnel within this section, although 2 under the livestock section. One provides support to our nursery and 1 provides support to our animal control section, as we do not have a livestock component of our ADS. Under the 2022 staffing, we have 8 positions that are not funded. And the pictures reflect some of our recent events, our expansion to our nursery with the hiring of the new agricultural management specialist 3, who has just expanded the services our nursery provides. We had a farmer recognition day, and in the top you'll see Ms. Amparo Pangilinan, who was our Northern Farmer of the Year. Services provided include farm inspections, our bona fide certification, our registered farmer certification. On the next slide, you'll see our federally funded programs, farm plan development assistance, crop compensation in the event that there is a natural disaster, with a declaration from the governor and appropriation from the legislature, and we provide workshops, training, and technical assistance to our agricultural community. Next slide, please. ADS, which is our Agricultural Development Services, this fiscal year received $367,291. In the proposed fiscal 22 budget, we will receive $376,958. The special funds that support the ADS section is the Plant Nursery Revolving Fund. Although I'm hard-pressed to call it supporting the ADS section, as for the last 3 years, it has only accrued about $6,790, where we've seen a more substantial jump in the last year, given that we now have a nursery personnel managing it. Federal funds come in the way of grants that we apply for through the USDA. We currently have 3 ongoing project grants and 1 grant for $121,000 that we're sort of considered the sub-grantor, providing these through micro grants to farmers in the community. It's a micro grant for food security program. So our total federal funds under ADS is $851,171. Although, as I specified, the grants primarily support projects, and within each project we have been permitted to hire limited term appointment personnel who typically serve for 2 years, or unless their grant is somehow extended, then they continue on. And we've been using the same personnel to continue the experience that they've learned, and they grow with the different projects. Next slide, please. Our next section is the Animal Health, Animal Control Services. We currently have 4 personnel within that section, 3 of whom were funded initially under the Tourism Attraction Fund, and though we've seen the significant drop in the funding, they've now been moved onto the general fund. Our budget request includes 2 funded positions and 6 currently not funded positions. The 2 funded positions are in progress of recruitment. Our animal control section not only handles strays, but also all animal import permits, animal export health certificates for people leaving island, animal cruelty investigations, and although it falls under us, we haven't had the capacity to engage in animal welfare inspections, which include livestock, and pet facility and sanitary inspections and permits. Next slide. Our general fund appropriation for fiscal year 21 is $390,676. For the coming fiscal year, the request is $363,113, and this is used solely for salaries and benefits. Under special funds, we have our Rabies Prevention Fund, which saw an appropriation of $44,610. Fiscal year 22 brings it to $40,667. And our Tourism Attraction Fund, as you saw, substantially dropped, and in fiscal year 22 will be $5,350, which is primarily to cover the travel for the territorial veterinarian to attend one continuing education conference annually, which is a part of his contract with the government of Guam. We applied for a technical assistance program grant through DOI for $295,000, and we have not found out if we have been awarded this grant at the time. The grant budget breakdown is included on the right, so it just shows how we allocated the funds that were as part of our grant proposal. Next slide, please. Our biosecurity division encompasses our entomologist, invasive species coordinator, administrative staff, and our commodities inspectors. They have one agriculturalist who also provides services and support to the community. These positions are all funded under the Invasive Species Fund. We have, in the 2022 budget request, 9 unfunded positions. As you'll see in the next slide, the appropriation for the Invasive Species Fund just covers all of that personnel. Services provided include plant import permits, inspections of cargo, and some of the outreach through and technical assistance provided with grant funding. Typically, when people hear of the biosecurity division, they associate it with the coconut rhinoceros beetle and little fire ant. So I wanted to show pictures that indicate other forms of invasive species that the section also handles. So the 2 on the right are invasive vines and flowers, or well, the one in the middle is an invasive flower, invasive vine, and the second was someone who had brought in hundreds of ladybugs that somehow got through the system, and then they posted online that they were releasing these out in the wild. And the same with the flowers. This was a nursery that is propagating this invasive vine. So the biosecurity section is not just limited to on-site inspections of cargo, but also internet and having access to different forums and groups. And then on the very left is the one that is the bane of most of our existence, the chains of love, cadena de amor. Next slide. The biosecurity section is primarily funded through special funds. The appropriation of the Guam Invasive Species Fund, as I said, covers salaries and benefits. This is $610,000 for fiscal year 21, $623 in the budget request for fiscal year 22. The Plant Inspection Permit Fund, which is the fees accumulated through some of the permits that are coming in, but also, or is appropriated through the legislature. So just a slight drop, but this primarily covers utilities, the copier lease, tipping fees, annual memberships, and such. The Tourism Attraction Fund appropriation dropped substantially. This is where we saw the funding that covered animal control officer positions, but also agricultural technician positions for the biosecurity section. At this point, it's $23,024 for fiscal year 24. On the right, you will see the federally funded projects that have been awarded through grant proposals in the biosecurity section, totaling $807,000. These are projects that address little fire ant, coconut rhinoceros beetle, and then surveys for other invasive species such as snails and fruit flies. Next slide. Our Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources, also known as DAR, although it's divided into fisheries and wildlife, there's also a third section that is not quite recognized but is growing right now, is the local coordination and administration. Local coordination means this is the section that does inspections and writes out permits for everything from depredation permits to construction and clearing grading permits, scientific collection permits, and import permits. And this section also houses our administrative staff. They are funded at 40% local funding, 60% federal funding. Right now, our budget request includes 2 positions that are funded and in process of recruitment, which includes our assistant division chief and a clerk typist 3. So when they're doing the coordination, part of the federal consistency reviews and permit reviews include the assessment of endangered or listed species such as the snail on the right, which was once thought extinct on Guam, but has now been found to exist in many locations. It's the Partulid radiolata. That's one of the few scientific names I've learned, and I can't recall the regular name for it now. Next slide, please. So for these technical positions, the funding at 40% for fiscal year 21 came out to $122,743, and the 60% at federal funds was $248,993. The fiscal year 22 request brings it to $142,557, and federally funded at 60%, $249,992. I wanted to mention that this section has the 5 positions and 1 federally funded position at 100% for our program coordinator 3, Mr. Kitagwa. But I wanted to illustrate the number of permits and federal consistency reviews that section has handled in the last year, with just 1 person conducting inspections, writing the reviews, and then sending them up the chain for review and signature. 1 person handled over 293 construction permits, 62 clearing grading permits, 16 scientific review permits, 12 federal consistency reviews, that's no small feat, especially with the federal consistency reviews, because they're typically done for military projects or federally funded projects, and they're much larger in scale. Okay, next slide. Under the fisheries and wildlife sections, we have 100 federally funded positions, at 45 100% federally funded positions totaling $2.8 million. 33 are currently filled or with recruitment in progress, and 12 vacancies. These positions handle over 72 federal grants totaling $15.2 million. The federal grants cover everything from their personnel salaries and benefits to operational needs and supplies, equipment, vehicles, travel, everything. So though it's included in our budget presentation, each of those dollars is spoken for and assigned a specific job within each of their project proposals and grant funding. Next slide, please. Our Forestry and Soil Resources Division. We have 1 division chief and currently 1 forester. This is a dramatic drop from last year where we had 3 foresters and 1 division chief due to retirement and 1 transfer. They have 1 administrative assistant and 10 forestry aides. In order to handle the workload that they need, typically 12 to 14 forestry aides would be much more conducive to a supportive task assignment and separation for shifts when they're fighting fires. Under our 2022 budget request, we have 2 funded positions and 2 unfunded positions. We're trying to bring back 2 Forester 2s. The division chief has taken on the role of handling roughly 3 different grant projects right now, or grant programs. The programs include the forest stewardship, which is where they partner with private landowners to restore native tree habitat on their properties. It's a really great program. It's free to the landowner. You just sign up and then tell us what kind of native trees you want on your property, and we plant them for you, or we propagate them for you and then give to the landowner to plant. It can also include fruit trees if they're interested in that. The Urban and Community Forestry Program, which handles just plants and trees within the urban areas and provide support to the community members. They have a project that they're working on with Island Girl Power to restore parks in Dedido. A cooperative fire protection program, which just saw the swearing in of our forestry aides, forester, and division chief as peace officers, which is long overdue. They've been serving in this function since the late 70s, early 80s, and have never been recognized as peace officers, although they spend 6 months out of the year fighting fires, and then the remaining 6 months reforesting the areas that have been damaged due to fires. We have our cooperative forest health program that works in collaboration with our wildlife section and biosecurity function subdivision to assess the tree health and plant health in our jungles and to determine the impact of invasive species. And we recently updated Guam's Forest Action Plan with a 5-year update that the division chief pretty much handled largely on her own and with a few stakeholder partners. Next slide, please. The forestry section receives general funds for salaries and benefits, which is part of what has been tough with getting the level of personnel that they need. They're currently funded at $928,000, but because of retirements and then transfers, that brought the allotment of money to $823,000 for fiscal year 22. With the various grant projects, which you see illustrated below, they have grants totaling $338,631 for fiscal year 21. All of their operations are funded through grant funding, while personnel and salaries are locally funded. Next, we have our law enforcement conservation section. We have our conservation officer, Richard Regadio, Lieutenant Regadio, who's sitting outside and will join us if you have any questions for him. We have one conservation officer who's getting set to transfer out of this section. He's been a long-serving officer. His departure will allow us to potentially recruit 2 new recruits, as he's been in his position for, I think, over 2 decades. We recently promoted 3 Conservation 1 officers to Conservation 2. That was a promotion that was at a minimum of 10 years overdue. They'd been at the Conservation Officer 1 position for 10 years. A Conservation Sergeant who is getting ready to retire, and 2 LTA recruits that we're working on permanizing. Our budget request includes 1 funded position and 7 unfunded positions. The services provided, I think most of us are familiar with conservation officers protecting our marine protected areas, enforcing hunting regulations, fishing regulations, and protecting our endangered and protected species. Next slide. Their salaries are funded through the general fund, and also they are given an appropriation for operations. In the last fiscal year, it was lumped together, so the fiscal year 21 appropriation, general fund appropriation was $759,000. For fiscal year 22, it drops to $667,000, with $612,000 for personnel and $54,000 for operations. They did apply for and receive a grant to fund our civilian volunteer conservation officer program, which funding ends for in fiscal year 21. Next slide. I'm sorry? Oh, okay, well, in your handout then, sorry, that was a prior email. In your handout slide, you'll see a slide for Guam Animals in Need with appropriations for $142,585. What isn't included in that appropriation is the expenses that come out of Department of Agriculture's budget to cover utilities and tipping fees that totals roughly $16,000 annually. So the expenses that are that we cover for GAIN are not included in the budget appropriation for GAIN. And lastly, coronavirus funding. We received $1,500 from the first series of corona funding that was given to the government. We used that to purchase PPE such as masks, alcohol, and sanitizers. The department was a pass-through for $988,000, $988,803 from the Department of Commerce through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for Fishers Relief. We have been able to, really, it felt like pulling out 467 applications from our fishing community to be able to receive that entire $988,000 that will be shared among those 467 applicants. We have a second round of fisheries relief funding that is coming and should be disseminated through July to September. It's $783,727. So in the end, the Department of Agriculture receives $3.7 million in local funds between general fund and special funds, and roughly $17 million in federal grant projects that we handle, divided between each of the sections. Our sections apply for grant funding through submission of proposals. The only one that, well, DAR receives a bulk of that at $15 million, which is money that is apportioned to the island. So it's available to us, and we just need to apply for it through projects that have to be approved. Everyone else applies through typically competitive grant processes. So I find that very noteworthy and admirable of our staff that they've been able to augment a lot of their needs with grant funding. And that concludes our slide presentation. We're ready for any questions if you have any, senators.
All right, thank you. I have several questions from Senator Rigel couldn't make it. He's what they would say under the weather. He's not feeling well. I'd like to also recognize that my colleagues that have joined us, we have Senator Brown, Senator Toniata, Senator Duenas, and Senator Perez. I have a few questions from Senator Clinton. How many animal, and you might have brought it up during your slides, but I'm going to ask it, okay, just so that you can answer it and then the people of Guam can hear it, and your staff. How many animal control officers do you need to control the animal population and address the stray dog problem? How much funding is needed to hire them, or do you have sufficient funding?
Well, to handle our animal control needs,
if you want, you can use your slide that you had that you put up, and then we can go over
Sure.
that, and then you can answer that.
well,
so
I
we
have,
can make the adjustment.
right now, our budget request includes, let's see, an additional 5 animal control officers, I believe.
Okay, and that's part of your, and if I'm correct, that's slide number 3, right, or is that 4?
Slide number 5, please.
Slide number 5. Okay, and if they can put it up, the slide number 5, please.
There you go.
So we can see, okay.
So we currently have 2. We're in the process of recruiting an additional 2, and we're requesting for 5 additional positions.
How much is that gonna cost?
Roughly,
What is it
23.
estimated at?
it's, each position with salaries and benefits is $43,369. So roughly, I can give you an exact number, but a rough estimate would be about $210,000.
200K, okay. How many conservation officers do you need to be able to properly patrol the waters and jungles of Guam? How much funding is needed? I'm trying to find the slide, okay, so that we can get to the slide and it'll start match up.
Okay, our conservation officers are at slide number 14. So the ideal number would be 20. The number that we think would be workable and manageable to have shifts cover both morning, evening, and then a swing shift would be
Okay.
around 14 officers. Each officer position for a conservation recruit with salaries and benefits is $52,867. So with an additional 7, that would roughly be $370,000.
370K, okay. And the last question he had was, recently forestry personnel were sworn in as peace officers. Are they now entitled to the 40% increase in pay? And so how much is needed to pay them their increase? Because that's something that should have been automatic, it should have been put in your budget, but you probably didn't put it in there, but.
No, we swore the officers in just last week, actually, or
Last
maybe
week?
about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, and has that been included into and factored into the budget?
No, it has not, sir.
Okay, then you need to put it in. And what is that cost gonna be?
It's roughly $127,000.
Okay, so that would total to about what? 370, 210?
Well, the 127 would be in addition to their current salaries at $319,000, so the total would be $416. There's 1, 2, 3.
What is the
4,
total
5,
package? You gave me a 210, then you gave me 370, and
Oh,
then
I'm
what-
sorry, you're adding the other numbers. I was looking at the
I
forestry
do the
numbers.
addition as we go along,
Yes, sir.
so that
Okay,
then we know what the total package is.
Sure,
So what is that amount? I know you got somebody there that can do the math.
yes.
210, 370 is ready 590, 580.
Okay,
Other 10 is 4, is what, 900,000?
let's see, 43, 369 times 5, 268, 845, and then,
Because majority of your budget is really federal money. So helping you should be fairly easy. Because I would say your percentage of and one of your staff can answer that. What is the percentage of local money, federal money? What is the percentage? Please give me that.
okay.
70% federal?
Well, it
If somebody
depends on
can
the
speak.
section, because DAR has 45%.
I want to know the total. Stop going individual division, because the last time I heard, this is for the Department of Agriculture, so give me the total. What is your total federal funding percentage versus your total package?
Okay,
Just give me, we're talking Department of Agriculture, okay? And then
Yes.
we'll look at gain and we'll look at everything else, but we need to know what we're dealing with the Department of Agriculture. Because I look at your budget, it's 3.7, and I keep hearing, I heard earlier it was 15 million was federal funding, so that's already telling me do you have an ASO view here? Do you have somebody in
yes, we do,
finance?
she's right here.
Have her do the math real quick, and then we'll move on. Okay?
Okay. It's roughly 54% that is locally funded, and then 46% that's federally funded.
What is your total federal funding you get?
For the grants, it's at
To-
$15
total.
million.
$15 million, and you're getting $3 million from local. That's 54%? Ay, por favor.
Well, because DAR brings in $15 million in and of itself. Sorry, our total federal funding is $17,275,000, and that covers 45 fully funded personnel and 5 personnel funded at 40%.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just move along with my questions. Those were the 3 questions I asked was from your oversight chair. I'm not gonna ask you about federal assistance
Oh,
because you identified it, but you are aware that the 36th Guam legislature, this body, has requested the governor to give you $5 million in ARP, correct?
Yes. Yes.
If you got the $5 million, would that be able to assist you in what your shortfall is? If you say no, I'm gonna say shame on you. That's more than what you asked for so far that I've read.
Yes.
Thank
sir.
you. That's what I
Absolutely.
want to hear. The reason why I'm trying to sell this to you is so that the administration is listening to this budget hearing. We're asking them to give you $5 million. You're asking for less than $1 million more. That'll take care of your conservation officer, take care of just about everything, to include in our resolution, our letter first, and our resolution is to ask that they even provide you a means to take care of game and your conservation officer's building. $5 million is a lot of money. Okay, so I just wanted to express that to you so that your staff, because you guys do a lot. And when you started identifying permits, you have one individual doing inspection for permits for 293, if I'm correct, right?
Yes.
That's not the norm. You know, the word has been on the street is that if you see 5 people standing and they're Gov Guam, one of them is working and the other 4 is not. In your shop, you don't see 5, you see 1 doing the work of 5.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to promote you. Department of Agriculture, you guys do a great job. I hope that we can get a hold of the rhino beetle and all these invasive species that are coming in, because the people of Guam are going through a lot. It's enough with the pandemic. And then prior to that was the rhino beetle. Then prior to that is people like to burn forestry. You know, and
Yes.
there's got to be a drawdown. I think the pandemic actually forced people to stay home. Maybe that's why there wasn't that many fires, but then again, there were still fires. Okay, so with that note, I'd like to pass and ask Senator Peter Terlai if he has any questions, and then we'll have Senator Brown, and then we'll move along with the rest of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I just have one question, but I just want to ask the director, do you have any plan for the American Rescue Plan? Because some of the things that you have can be accommodated and satisfied by this funding. Can you give us an outline or just what you plan to recommend in as far as getting the funding from the American Rescue Plan?
Well, we've discussed the same issues that the same work that we've done here with the governor. So she's aware of our needs, and we leave it to her to have that final decision.
Okay. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, I want to thank you, Madam Director, for sending Lieutenant Regadio to my office. And we totally observed the request, your funding. And it, you know, on your budget request, I can see that your budget request is within the confines of the governor. And who knows more other than the people working for you guys on your funding. Madam Director, your budget between 2021 and 2022 is just about even. And either you go up on 2021, or you go down on 2022, so it's just about even. But one of the things that I wanted to bring is, Madam Director and staff, you know, Chapter 60, Title 5 of the Guam Code annotated says that all fines and penalties that the court collects in regards to violations of the conservation law are supposed to be remitted back to the Department of Agriculture, to the Wildlife Conservation Fund. Are you getting those funds back from the court?
Well, the wildlife conservation, the fines that have been remitted, no, we do not. We don't receive any funding from the court on any of them. What we do receive funding for is if an asset has been seized, then the funding from the asset forfeiture mitigation is typically around $500. But we haven't received any funding through the court, as our officers have not been issuing citations.
Madam Director, you might want to meet or write a letter to the director of the court, the administrator of the court, because according to this particular chapter, Chapter 60, Title 5 of the Guam Code annotated, all the money that is paid to the court to, Wildlife Conservation Fund should be remitted back to you guys. So you might write a letter to the administrator of the court. And that's about all, Mr. Chair, that I wanted to bring up, because I want to make sure that those money goes back to the Department of Agriculture. And I know you guys are doing a lot, and I give you all the credit, your staff, and because I know they're working pretty hard, and I want to thank them for their services. And Madam Director, you're doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And I have to say, I'm really proud to work with the people I work with.
Thank you, Senator Tulay. And Madam Director,
Yes, sir.
do you know what that amount may be that Senator Tulay brought up, that the court is holding on to, that wasn't remitted back to you? Are we going to say $1 million?
No, I want to say that in most cases, there's no citations issued that would accrue with the court. And most of the cases are not adjudicated, so there's no fines or penalties attached to either, which is where our losses come from. Our officers can arrest the people, and in most, I really want to say in all of the cases, there's nothing that's been adjudicated, so there's been no fines attached either. So really the only funding comes from the mitigation of the asset forfeiture, which is typically the vehicle. But at the same time, part of what I've considered and discussed with our team is that even that needs to, at some point, be stopped because it just becomes a revolving door for people committing offenses. So we need to take a harder line on that.
Yes, I would expect you would, and I would hope that you would get with your oversight chair and come up with a plan and identify a fine. When you confiscated a vehicle, you come with a fine. Separate the forfeiture of the vehicle and whatever it costs. But it's got to make sense. Otherwise, you're not making a bang
Yes, you're right.
to the offender. That being said, I would move now. Senator Brown, do you have any questions or comments to the panel, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do, but since you brought this up, I don't believe we've done the court yet. Have we done the court? I don't think we've done the court budget yet, have we? And we certainly don't want to influence the judiciary, but this has been a long-standing concern that, the respective Division of Agriculture through the conservation officers have done the law enforcement side of it, and then we hear that these cases are not addressed in the court. And so ultimately, really, there's no enforcement going through the judicial process to ensure that hopefully the offenders don't continue to do what they're doing. Right now, I get arrested, and next week I'll be out again. What are you going to do about it? We certainly don't want to influence the judiciary, but I mean, if they're not executing their responsibilities with regards to these cases, or they're not being prosecuted by the Attorney General's office, because obviously that needs to be brought before the court. I think those are the kind of questions, Mr. Chairman, we should ask, because I don't think, these type of violations in the community against our natural resources, of course, humanly and bodily harm are important, but also the damage to our resources are important. And I think we have a community now, especially our young people, that are getting more informed and more aware and value these assets that we have that have been given to us. So I think that's an important point to recognize. I mean, we put all these resources, and I would, if I was a conservation officer, I'd be tremendously discouraged in doing my work, knowing time and time again, no matter what my efforts are, and they're probably running into the same offenders out there that are violating the law, because our judicial system is not moving forward with addressing these cases and taking appropriate action, especially when the evidence is there. And of course, when you confiscate it, it's the evidence is there. And I think that's probably something we should put a lot more time and attention and inquire of our judicial system as to why they are not moving forward with these cases. I did want to ask with regards to, you mentioned, of course, and it's a natural course of process of people moving on or retiring from department and agencies in the government of Guam, and you mentioned there's a number of positions that you've had, your personnel retire. Are you able to go back? Is the funding for those positions remaining in your budget, so you're able to go back and announce and fill those positions, or is the money essentially disappear with the position when someone steps down and retires, which makes it difficult to go back and recruit again?
It becomes a race. We need to hurry and fill the position, hurry and recruit for the position to ensure that we can keep the funding with that position. Because then when the next fiscal year, and I'll ask our ASO to chime in as well, but when we come to the next fiscal year, then the position also comes back down to a step one, which means you don't really retain the full amount for the position that was just left. But am I saying that correctly, Tony? Okay.
Why would that be the case if you're appropriated that amount? Because, I look at your budget as I look at other budgets in Governor Guam, and I continue to see the disproportionate amount of resources being invested in these natural resource agencies. I mean, EPA, who I have, a lot of history with, even yours. I mean, the amount of the vacancy line below your existing personnel listing is significant in almost every key division. So I'm a little concerned about that. I mean, we're hearing it's a time of plenty, money's flowing, deficits are being paid, and rah-rah-rahs, and we're just have a wonderful party. But when I look at this, I'm a little concerned because, I'm sure maybe as a result of this pandemic, maybe nationally, U.S. Department of Health probably is getting a lot more money than they were before. But the second highest, at least in my experience, federally funded agency, aside from of course, the military, is USDA. There's substantial resources, and of course, it's evident in the amount of grants and things that your department is receiving. But here on Guam, total opposite. I mean, it's you're almost scraping to get by in an area where the potential, and certainly, Mr. Chair, we often talk about developing our agricultural resources on Guam and expanding it. I mean, this pandemic has also showed us the impact and the importance of food security. We have typhoons here or there, rainy weather, sunny weather, but overall, a lot of the crops and things that can be grown in spite of that. And the opportunity that's there to expand our local agriculture that can benefit our community with, fresh fruits and fresh vegetables and things that would be much more healthier for us. But yet, in terms of our policy as a legislature, we continue years, and this has been going on for years, not to adequately fund agencies that have the opportunity to stimulate economic development on Guam. And there's many positive benefits that we can derive from expanding agriculture's ability to do exactly what they're mandated to do. So I think we need to be mindful for that. So I mean, I'm a little concerned about the fact that you have to be in a race to fill a position, especially knowing sometimes through DOA, the process of recruitment is very time-consuming in the government. But I appreciate you letting me know that. With regards to your conservation officers, you have only six now that are according to the paperwork here, you're in your budget, you're recruiting another one, but right now it's just 6 active conservation officers, which again continues to.
Yes.
That's a very small number. I mean, when I was here, it was, between 20 and 18, and 19. Now you're down to 6.
But we'll be totally happy with 14.
No, I totally understand, but I think it's a shame you have to beg and scrape when, other agencies, we give millions and we don't even, ask for any degree of accounting to what we are asking of you and your department, and our actual contribution to this process is really nominal compared to the overall Guam budget. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope that we very much seriously, because as we talked about providing resources to agencies that do frontline work out in the community and that engage with our community, certainly I think supporting increasing the numbers of conservation officers should be a priority in this upcoming budget that we're going to be addressing for the upcoming fiscal year. I know we're in a time of, challenging finances, even, because we know the federal money is going to dry up here. But these are key areas I think we need to put some investment in. And I know they can look at other, federal funding perhaps for some of their equipment that they need. I'm going to go through some of the equipment here that might be a priority listed for your conservation division. But I definitely have to say, if there's an area where we need to put more support to have additional personnel, it's definitely with regards to conservation. I mean, if we whittle them down, which is where they're at, to almost nothing, it makes it very difficult to do their job and do their enforcement. And particularly the area of responsibility, I mean, is not just our island, but also our coastal waters, and certainly being one of the main members of the previous legislatures that was a major advocate for the implementation of the law over 24 years ago to create our marine preserves. I most definitely want to see proper protection put in place for those resources and proper regulation put in place. And the only way to do that is have these conservation officers out in our community responding and being engaged in that process. So I'm definitely going to want to work with the oversight chair and our finance chair to see what resources can be provided. I'm very happy to hear his comments this morning of wanting to support you and your mandate and the work that you and your employees are doing at the Department of Agriculture. With regards to, I know there's a lot of need within the division itself, but I also understand that some of the most critical things that are needed for the Conservation Division have to do with getting an additional police enforcement vehicle, a heavy-duty truck vehicle.
Yes.
The other thing that has been brought to my attention that there's definitely a need, and it's a safety factor, is body armor.
Absolutely.
I believe his existing armor out is relatively old.
Yes, it is.
So for the protection of your officers, I think you need about 20 additional body armor. It costs about $23,000+.
Yes.
And a trailer, a UTV trailer. It's about $6,000, and the truck you're looking at for the requirement, she needs about 70.
Yes, ma'am.
70,000+. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the additional conservation officers. I wanted to ask, how is the program coming along with your volunteer conservation officers? Do you have any applicants or people that are already involved, and how many, and how's that coming along?
So Officer Regadio is outside right now, and I'm sure he would love to jump at answering that question. But I do know that he's had some who have just been tremendous and outstanding. As we said during our TOCA launch, There are conservation recruits, they're supposed to meet 43 hours a month. There are those that come and far exceed that, and they're volunteering to do that because they love the work. And they're showing the dedication and commitment even before it's asked of them. So Officer Regadio does have in mind those that he would absolutely like to add to their force.
And is your budget reflective of adequate funding for the, I know we had that recent increase in the stipend, a couple $100s. Is your budget reflective of that to be able to cover your additional volunteer officers?
No.
What would you need for that?
That would be part of
fiscal year?
the unfunded positions, for the 7 conservation recruits.
So currently you don't have funding set aside for the volunteer conservation officers with their $500 stipends?
Part of what we've been trying to do is work with NOAA law enforcement section to be able to reimburse their stipend payments so that it can become its own budget. We're still in the process with them. Their legal counsel had asked that we change the word from whatever it was before to stipend, so we changed that word for them, and also changed that it was to be used for uniforms for operations. So now we're going back and forth with them about the word volunteer. So it's a slow process, but we're moving through it. And as I said during our testimony for that public hearing, I don't deter easily. So keep throwing at me whatever obstacle you want, and I'll keep facing it and asking you what else can we do.
Yeah. How about with the current ones that you have on board? How are you addressing their compensation then while you're working these details out with NOAA?
Well, there are some who just aren't showing up. There's maybe 1 or 2, and it's not out of dereliction or anything, but some of them are on military orders. So we're just rolling whatever money's not being used to pay out one officer to be used to compensate the others.
And how many volunteer officers do you have currently?
We started
now?
out with 12. And I think right now he's had about maybe 8 that have been actively showing up.
That's pretty good. I mean, if we could do that and multiply that with additional funding for conservation officers, that would be the most critical. I mean, I know there are needs in the department. I mean, looking at, like I said, each division, the number of vacancy positions are significant. It's almost, some pages here, it's almost half of your operation that are vacant. I won't belabor it, Mr. Chairman. I know there's other details in the weeds that we can get into, but I think overall, if we certainly, I mean, putting a few $100,000 or $1 million, 2 or 3 more towards Department of Agriculture really can be multiplied in terms of the benefits and tangible benefits that our community can receive from the Department of Agriculture. I mean, it's been one of those agencies over the years that really has not gotten the support that it needs, considering its mandate and certainly the delivery and benefits to our community and to our economy that they can return back from their operations. So I certainly am very much an advocate of wanting to see more resources put your way. And thank you very much for your advocacy for you and your staff members. You're going to find, Chelsea, this is probably the most exciting job you will ever have.
Absolutely, I love it every day.
People might not think that, but for me, I still look back at my days at Guam EP as the most exciting job. It just came at the right time in my life, and just being able to do something I was very passionate about, and with a team that I was able to work with, even in spite of the limited resources. I still look back on those days as probably my most enjoyable time of my career. So
agree with you 1,000%, and I absolutely love the job that I'm doing, and even running on 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
It's great right now.
Well, I certainly wish you well in your continued work, and thank you very much for providing your presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Brown. And Mrs. Breck, the percentage I was asking you, 25% is local, 75% is federal. And I agree with Senator Brown. We're going to figure out a way how to get you more funds, because you're a true multiplier. For everything we fund, $1, you're getting $3, $4, $5 federal. Outstanding. Senator Chris Duenas, do you have any questions, sir, or comments?
Sidus Masi, Mr. Chairman. And good morning, Chelsea. And
Good morning, Senator.
to your team, thank you for being here. Yeah, I'm going to echo the comments of my colleagues. I just think that we've got to start rebuilding at the ground level, and I know you know that, and I know you're going to do that, but where the boots are hitting the ground is what I see throughout the budget that, we're lacking, and we're going to need to address that. So moving from the conservation officers going into the biosecurity division. As you know, that's particular to me. It's our baby, really. And so I see the breakdown on the biosecurity division, entomologist, invasive species coordinator. What's that total staffing pattern on the top line? Because on the bottom line, you have your 22 budget requests and 9 not funded. So what is the top line totals?
Right now, it's $610,000.
But staffing, how many warm bodies do you have
Oh,
on that? I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing the 9 unfunded under the 22.
oh, there's
But,
the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positions. There's the entomologist and the commodity inspector 3.
So those are all funded and filled?
Yes.
Okay. And the reason why I wanted to go there was I wanted to find out, I know that aside from the funding and the positions, one of the biggest issues was our ability to be co-partners at the border with customs. And I think that's important, although this is a budget hearing, with the positions we have here and understanding the carrying out the mission, how is that going?
I want to say that it's making progress. We've had 2 meetings with Customs and Quarantine to discuss what that looks like with our officers manning the port and the airport with them. The port has agreed to give us, our officers, a space, but I mean, we have 1 commodity inspector 3 and 2 1 positions. So the commodity inspector 3 officer would have to be there to supervise the ones at their station. And during the last meeting we had with Customs, we talked about what that, I mean, because we can't just sort of shove everybody together and expect it to flow. We need to be able to outline what that flow is going to look like. So that's the part that we've been working through with them. But CQA has been completely open to the process, as have we. So I feel that really soon we'll have a solution and a process for what it looks like to have our people with their people at the borders, because then it also goes into not just the inspections, but who do you call when you find something? Is it going to be the entomologist, or is there someone on CQA's team who would want to investigate that? And then what is the SOP going to look like for that process in and of itself?
So fundamentally, I just want to make sure we're on the same page with the positions not funded, but you're going to do some recruitment under there, right?
We're trying to do some recruitment, and we also have draft legislation that with Senator Rangel that we've discussed with the Invasive Species Council, as well as the Port Users Group and the Chamber of Commerce, to change how we're billing the invasive species fee so that it ends up becoming a per container rather than having to quantify the weights and reconcile the weights versus the amounts that are collected. It would just be simpler to do it that way, to do it per container, and then also to address other areas that are potential imports for invasive species as well. So we've brought all the partners to the table to discuss this, and so far everyone's on board with that. And then that will allow us to actually get the fund to the $2 million it's supposed to be accruing annually, whereas each year we've been hovering around the $600,000 mark.
Okay, so just to review, Mr. Chair, because I think this is important, the whole idea behind creating this was border protection first, and then if something made it through, then it would be containment.
Yes.
And if unfortunately, like the rhino beetle, the little fire ant, and others that have gotten past, then it's eradication. And that's setting it up with, of course, that's a much more difficult process. And the reason why I bring this up, Chelsea, I just think it's so important that we understand that everything we catch at the border really, eliminates the other 2 situations that we find ourselves in now. And that's why this is so important, not in the manpower, but also that brothers in arms at the border. We know that Customs controls the border, but the fact of the matter is being side by side, and that's why I'm excited about, the new inspection facility, because I think that's really going to facilitate at the port and make it so much easier. But still, you're going to need that manpower because you've got those 3 mandates, and that's what the council is supposed to be coordinating, because we're still going to have to deal with eradication. We're still going to have to deal with when it gets beyond and when it's containment. So I'm going to follow this closely, and I know that, and I thank you for answering the list of questions that I sent you a couple months ago in terms of where we're at with this. And I guess I would just finalize my questioning by saying, when do you expect the next meeting for the Invasive Species Council?
We just had one on the 10th.
Okay.
And we're finalizing the update for the invasive species management plan, where we've drafted a letter to send to the OPA to audit the invasive species fund. And we've assessed or reviewed the legislation to amend collection for the invasive species fund. So we're making good progress, and we are tremendously excited about the new CQA inspection facility. You're right, that's going to be a complete game changer for everything and how we deal with everything. And CQA has been completely open with wanting us to have a space there with them.
Good. Yeah, so going forward, I just wanted to close by saying, when my discussions with the University of Guam, this was their key component too, for them to be able to continue, what they're doing at their level by all of the, identification of species and other methods on that higher level when we have to go to eradication. This is a key component to further federal funding and studies and science and everything else we're doing to make sure that we can protect our island to the fullest extent. So I appreciate your efforts, and like I said, I think you can see our passion from this side of the aisle saying, boots on the ground is what we need, and we appreciate your efforts in that level. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Adder, do you have any questions or comments for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Madam Director, and to your team here. Thank you for your budget presentation to the legislature. I just want to have perhaps a couple of questions, and I just wanted to follow up on Senator Brown's concern of with your vehicles. I noticed that you have 6 conservation officers, right?
Yes.
And then you have 5 vehicles in the conservation section here, but only 1 is operational?
That would be some of the original vehicles that were purchased for the officers. What they do also have are some mitigation vehicles that they use for surveillance and such. But right now, the one operational vehicle, I think, is the one of the newer vehicles that was appropriated through the legislature.
The 2010 Expedition?
Yes.
So you have 4 Nissan Frontiers that are being surveyed. And, that's the concern, right? Is that here we have, and we want to bring on additional conservation officers, but we don't have the equipment for them. What is your plan to mitigate or bring on? Because I didn't see any appropriation for purchase of vehicles in your budget proposal. So what is your plan to mitigate the situation with the vehicles for the conservation officers?
Honestly, Senator, that's part of the decision that I had behind stopping the mitigation of forfeitures. Basically, if we seize your vehicle, we're keeping it.
Yeah, but do you have any vehicles that are seized right now?
Yes, we do. Well, we have a boat that's seized right now. And this was just a harder line that we've decided to take with our team. We talked about it at one of our more recent chiefs meetings. I think it's gotten to the point where we feel the same frustration that Senator Brown spoke of, that we apprehend the offenders, and then in the end we're kind of like, oh, we feel bad for you because you have a hardship, so here's your vehicle. Yeah, we're not feeling bad anymore.
Yeah, so, I just want to make sure that, and it wasn't in the budget request, so, I'm just trying to figure out, are you part of the LISO program with DRMO?
Yeah, well, is that the same LESO program that Christine, our forestry chief, is part of a...
It's the firefighters program.
Oh, go ahead.
So the
You have to
Forestry
identify
Division,
yourself.
yeah, the Forestry Division is enrolled in the firefighter program, and the Federal Excess Personal Properties programs. So those are similar to the LESO. We screen at the DOD level through firefighter. If we miss it, then we screen at the next tier down, which is the Federal Excess Personal Properties. And it's awarded through the Forest Service and that partnership for wildland fire operations and emergency response. So for firefighter, if it's a screened asset, we get that we have it in service for a year. It can then become our asset for our local asset. But the problem is it's a screened asset, so you inherit all of the reasons why it was processed to begin with. So you can walk into the agency and see a fleet, but only a handful of those vehicles are operable. And we're using federal dollars to fix, when possible, those vehicles.
I see. So there is another concern again. So how do we go back again to, I mean, is this going to, Madam Director, is going to be part of your plan to the funding that you request from the governor to purchase vehicles for the conservation office? Because
Yes.
I noticed the same concern on animal control. You have 2 officers, 6 vehicles, and only 1, but it's requiring maintenance. So do we have any animal control officers out on the streets today?
Yes, we have 2.
And what are they using?
They're borrowing a vehicle from Forestry. But we have discussed this with the administration, yes, and we made clear that we have needs for vehicles. But as I said, in the meantime, we find our own solutions. So we've been partnering with USDA to receive their vehicles that they push out when they purchase new vehicles. The challenge with some of those is that they need repairs, so then we use our BPAs to repair the vehicles as needed.
You use who?
Our blanket purchase agreements.
So your vehicle maintenance program, your vehicle maintenance then is outsourced?
Not necessarily, well, yes, it is outsourced. We don't have an in-house mechanic. It's a position we've discussed that we'd like to have, but that's almost like a luxury right now in terms of like our staffing needs. So when we can get that, when we have each of our sections sufficiently staffed, then we can look at getting a maintenance person or a vehicle mechanic on staff as well.
Yeah, but I think the vehicles for conservation officers and animal control and everyone else is very important, because if we don't have the vehicles to put those personnel in, then we can have 45 conservation officers out there, but if we only have 1 Ford Expedition to take them around, I think we defeat the purpose. I think we need to ensure that, perhaps maybe include it into the budget, and if you get it, that would be one thing, but to not even request for at least 1 vehicle for each division, I mean, for animal control and conservation, I mean, we're not doing justice to them. So hopefully we'll be able to come up with a solution for that. The only other question I had was, I noticed on your equipment, capital, and space requirement listing, towards the bottom, you have a section here that says confiscated weapons, 138. What is your program for confiscated weapons? Do you have a destruction plan, or what happens to them?
That's one of the capital improvement needs that we have, is a facility for our conservation officers. The building that they originally occupied was condemned, so they share a building with the director's office right now. And in a warehouse, they have a facility to house the confiscated weapons, and they're basically stored there right now. And when GPD has weapon destruction, I think they haven't had one for a few years though, we send the equipment or the weaponry over to them for destruction.
So when was the last time weapons were scheduled for destruction, confiscated weapons?
My answer would be a guess. If you like, we can call in Officer Regadio to answer that question. We
Yeah.
have talked about it, and I remember it was a few years ago, but he would have a more concise answer.
Yeah, that would be great, because I think when we have 138 confiscated weapons, that becomes a concern, because now you're saying that your conservation officers were in a condemned building, now they're moving, so what is the security of these weapons? So,
Okay, we can call him in.
If we're gonna have somebody come in, stand by, we have to sanitize the area. And the individual that got up, you'd have to walk outside and then you come back in, okay? Then I need you to swear him in first, Sergeant Arms. So do not sit down yet. We'll have you sworn in first. And you state your name.
Under penalty of perjury, you affirm that any and all information you provide today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. Yes. Mr. Chair, he's under oath. You may proceed.
All right, thank you. Please have a seat and state your name before you respond to the question. Thank you, sir, and your position.
Good morning, Senators. Lieutenant Richard M. Regadio, the officer in charge of law enforcement section for the Conservation Officer, Department of Agriculture.
thank you, sir. I was just asking earlier the director, what is the program or the protocol for weapons destruction, and when was the last time you had confiscated weapons destroyed?
Quite frankly, Senator, that's been a while. That's been in the back burner for us because we have so much to do. But it has been in play where we're negotiating again with GPD to set up the scheduling to destroy those weapons. But it's been quite a while. I'd say maybe from the last lieutenant and all that, about 10 years, 8 to 10 years.
How long ago?
About 8 to 10 years. That don't hold me to that time frame, but it's been that while. The last time I know, because I've been deployed quite a few times, but the last time I know was when former Sergeant Watson and Sergeant Camacho and them, they did have a destroyed program, but that's way back and I can't recall. The weapons are secured in a...
No, I don't want to know where they're located or anything like that, just...
They haven't been, we haven't been scheduled, it hasn't been scheduled, right? We have talked about it with the director, but it has been tabled to a later time right now.
Okay, so I hope that, hopefully soon you come up with a plan to have these confiscated weapons destroyed, before your facility, wherever it's at, is compromised and, those confiscated weapons get back out onto the street.
Yes, sir.
We want to make sure that that is taken care of, and hopefully that becomes part of your, not back burner priority, but more of a priority up front because of the fact that, I don't believe, 138 confiscated weapons, that's a lot. And for you to continue to hold that and be responsible for that, that's something that you need to take care of. So hopefully, like I said, you come up with a plan, a program. If there's funding that needs to be allocated for the destruction, then that's something that we can look at and prioritize for the destruction of those weapons so that we can get it out of your hands and make sure they become inoperable for anyone else to use. All right?
Yes,
So
sir.
I appreciate it.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, that's the only questions I have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Perez, do you have any questions or comments for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to Director Chelsea and all the staff of the panel that you brought here today. I just want to commend you for all the work that you're doing. I think I have so much confidence in your leadership at Department of Agriculture, and I noticed some really good hires that you're getting. And it's just, I'm glad to hear that you enjoy every day of your work, and that translates to, I think, better service. And looking at your hierarchy, there's a lot that you have to handle. It's almost like a mega agency. When I look at like DRT, it's becoming like that. There's a lot of things a lot of responsibilities. And, just looking at, you guys are running frugal. About, like what the chair said, 25% is locally funded and 75% is federally funded. And you're requesting about $3.7 million to run all these services. I don't know, my intuition tells me that a lot of it is for direct services rather than administration. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So how many people are handling the administration, or
We're completely understaffed. I need to look no further than our ASO right here. When I joined the agency, there was so much frustration around the procurement process, the hiring process, and I think I feel comfortable saying that, people felt frustrated with our ASO. They thought that she wasn't willing to do things. But as soon as I stepped in, I saw that she's been carrying the agency for several years. She lost her complete administrative team. She doesn't have an assistant. She doesn't have an administrative aide. And it's the same for other sections. Forestry has one administrative assistant. The conservation officers don't have any. ADS doesn't have any. DAR has an AO and an administrative assistant that they just hired. But before that, it was just the AO and one clerk. So Tony handles all of the rest of the sections other than DAR. She works with the forestry admin aide, but she's basically juggling like 4 other sections on her own, and that's procurement and all employee and personnel work. That's budget. She does our budget. She puts this together basically by herself every year, twice a year, if anything. And even though we go through all of this hiring, she never asks for support. But every time we try to give her an additional staff, she says the other sections need it more. And I recognize that too. So we recognize our administrative shortcomings, but we try to just carry it as we can and then shift the personnel to the other sections first.
Yeah, I think that's, when we talk about government, we want to right-size it, right? So there has to be a balance, I think. And especially when you're talking about, onboarding, that just the planning process is an important task that often gets deprioritized because we're too busy trying to address the services, right? So, yeah, I think that there definitely is a balancing act when it comes to administration. So the other thing, too, is the Invasive Species Council. So I'm really, I'm glad that you are seeking funding outside of government, local government, and you've been very successful. In regards to the Invasive Species Council, I recall that, there was an estimate, prediction that it would be collecting much more money, I believe. I think it was $2 million annually.
Roughly $2.2 million annually.
Yeah, and you were mentioning earlier that you're working with the oversight chair to perhaps come up with a better way to, collect the fees that are easier, I think. Have you? I know you've had some gains, I think, in the last budget cycles or so, that you were able to collect more. Is that correct, or how is that fund operating?
I know that we've been working more diligently with the council and the port users group, and Mr. Hertzlet is one of my favorites because he's always really excited about working with our team on it. I think, where's the paper that shows how much this is in each? Oh, here it is. With the Invasive Species Fund, it's not so much that there's been a gain, it's just that we've been better at identifying who needs to make payments. But now it's been really consistently at around 600,000. Prior to that, it was around 4, as we were waiting for one of the larger carriers to sort of catch up. But since they've caught up, it's been consistently around 600,000 that's appropriated annually from the legislature.
Okay. Okay, it's good to see that you're getting an increase. I know that would help with your operations. In regards to invasive species, so, we've talked earlier, I think, in a meeting regarding my resolution to focus on eradication efforts at Cocos Island regarding the brown tree snake. I know that's going to cost additional funding, and maybe if you can tell us, perhaps, with the federal funding in place, what is needed from the local side to assist?
So it's a little bit more complex there because although the brown tree snake is an invasive species, our wildlife section has been handling that more so than our biosecurity section in terms of eradication, because the wildlife section deals with our endangered and protected birds. So the grantors have been funding not just the protection of the birds, but also the eradication of the brown tree snake. And they've been doing that through other agencies as well. So it's not just funding to our wildlife section, but also to our federal partners like U.S. Geological Services and USDA, and Department of Interior funding to our section. But U.S. Geological Services has their own brown tree rapid response team. It's an eradication team that came out to assess the snakes on Cocos Island, and then they're working directly with our wildlife section on putting together a plan for removal of the snakes. So I appreciate that you're asking about what funding we would need, but I feel that the funding, if we were able to receive that, would be more so used for education and outreach really than specifically addressing the programs, because the resolution that you proffered that will be used, or that will have its public hearing on Friday, we'd like to leverage that with our federal partners to enable them to get more funding for their rapid response team. And we have already written a project proposal to create a volunteer group and properly train them to also assist with the eradication. So we're doing what we have within our capacity right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And in regards to procurement, how long does it take to get something procured? Is there what's the delay?
Honestly, we've really, through the work of the clearinghouse, our procurement has sped up substantially. I think even these guys can attest that procurement doesn't look anything like it did 2 years ago. And our agency has been able to get the supplies and stuff that we need at a much quicker rate. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. All right, thank you for your response, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Ms. Brett, Chelsea, one of the unique things about this body, and every Guam legislature's body, is in the beginning of session, we make a pledge, the Inifresi. And you folks cover you follow that line. You protect the land, you protect our water, you support our culture, because everything you're doing is all related. And just hearing from the comments from my colleagues, I honestly believe we're going to come to terms to figure out how to get you funded. Because like I mentioned, 25% is local, 75% is federal. And it behooves me to believe at the end that we don't give you the adequate funding you need to make sure that the patrol officers, your conservation officers, are doing what they need to do, are out there protecting our waters. And then we take a look at your policies and your programs and regulations concerning weapons, confiscated items. Because being Senator Pito and I were in the police department, when weapons are confiscated, I would bet in about a year or 2 years, they start chopping them all up. It's gone. If they're not used for police use, it's gone. The weapons don't hang around that much. And just moving along and everything, and then we'll figure out where we need to go. I know the Office of Finance and Budget is going to be scheduling a meeting with you to find out how we can assist you. And then I'll communicate it to the body on how we're going to focus on. 2 years ago, you weren't on your feet. Now you're running. So we want to make sure you run and you can get in the car and get to where you need to go and be able to secure the property and equipment and everything else you're doing. All right? Thank you for your participation today. And the Committee on Rules, correction. This committee will conclude the budget hearing. The committee will continue to receive testimony. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. Augustine at gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 South Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. Jesus Marcy for your attendance today and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The budget hearing on Bill 55-36 COR relative to the Department of Agriculture is now adjourned. It is 10:25, and we'll be back at 2 o'clock with the Office of Public Accountability. Thank you. Have a nice day. Be safe.